Hey guys, I'm going to be releasing a bunch of different videos on the Chaos Dominion faction, looking over their abilities and giving you my opinion on how good they are in general, as well as where they might shine especially. So this video is going to be dedicated to the legendary Lord Ghan. So let's take a look at the Lord benefits first. We'll take a look at Ghan, the top one, which is the legendary Lord here. So up here it says 15% attributes for faction members. That's the standard that we normally see. And he also offers a damage bonus based on the percentage of HP lost, reaching a maximum of 60% damage bonus at 30% HP. That is insanely good. It doesn't sound it at first, but we'll talk about why in a little bit, why I think that's really good. And lastly, faction allies gain 20% attack and defense when HP is below 30%. So that kind of compounds, 60% bonus damage plus 20% attack and defense. So that's actually a massive amount of damage increase when you're below 30% HP. So I think that's potentially very, very, very powerful. And if you get him to awaken 2 or higher, all faction allies will be granted a flat 5% damage increase. So that's really quite strong. So let's have a look at Ghan. Ghan is the chaotic faction lord, as you can see up here. I think his artwork looks really good. I'm a big fan of some of the newer artwork that they've released in this game. I think these heroes look really good. It's such a shame that they're so exclusive because I like the way they look. I think they look interesting. Pretty cool giant dragon skull on his back. So yeah, I like the design. I think it looks great. Anyway, he is a defender. You can see he is common damage type, so no bonus to light armor or heavy armor, which is kind of standard for a defender especially. He has these tags, which is kind of their system for suggesting unique attributes about him. So arena mastery, AoE damage, damage reduction. So I think basic attributes might be a good place to start. So he has a block value of 3, pretty standard, a cost of 19, which is I think fairly average for a defender, and he has a revival time of 60, which is completely standard. So I just had a quick look at his base stats in comparison to other heroes, and I can say that Ghan actually has the highest HP of any of the defenders in the game. It is pretty close to Toreador, but it is significantly higher than Regulus and Reeve, Azhor, even Brokir. So yeah, he's very, very tanky on HP, and even his defense is actually one of the highest in the game of the defenders. However, on regards to his attack, Reeve, Toreador, and even Azhor have a higher base attack than him, with Captain Reeve and Toreador having over 1,000 attack higher. So yeah, he definitely seems to be tanky on base stats. His attack interval is about the same as most defenders, if not a little bit better than average. So overall, I think his stats are better than the average legendary defender, especially in regards to his HP and defense and a tiny bit in his attack interval. So moving on to his talents and his ability, let's start with talents first. Damage scales off of defense. Increases defense by 2% for 15 seconds each time taking damage, capping at 30% defense. So we were saying how his attack isn't that high. It's because it doesn't matter. He scales off of defense, and defense is one of his best stats as well. I think there's only 1 or 2 heroes that marginally beat him by a couple of points, so Ghan is actually pretty good on stats on that front. And if we look at his defense value, if it scales in the same way that attack would have done, and I think it does because gear scales in the same way attack percent versus defense percent, then he is only a little bit worse off than Toreador and Captain Reeve on defense scaling, which is crazy because this is also a defensive stat, obviously, makes him tankier. This also increases his defense by 2% for 15 seconds each time he takes damage, capping at 30%, which from that wording you can assume it's permanent, 30% increase. With a base of 4k, that's like 1300 defense extra. So very powerful there on his defense scaling. On his attack, he might actually be able to do reasonable damage. So let's have a look at his abilities now. AoE physical attack. Attacks up to 3 enemies in range, dealing 70% damage to each enemy. If you're familiar with Volker, the nightmare fighter that you can get from completing the storyline quest, she basically has the same basic attack. However, hers is a 100% scaling on attack rather than 70% on defense. I suspect that Ghan will be doing a little bit less damage than Volker on this attack, but it will definitely be quite good for a defender, especially with his scaling on defense. Next up we have his ultimate battle cry. It is a manual ultimate, so you can activate it yourself. It has a rage cap of 1,000. You start with 400 rage on deployment, and it has a 15-second cooldown. The cost can be reduced to 900, which is a pretty decent amount. It's not very high, it's not very low, it's kind of a good mid-level ultimate. And with skill ups, the duration is between 10 to 15 seconds based on skill ups, but the actual effect is, so Battle Cry increases your block by 3, grants physical and magical damage reduction starting at 30% but increasing to 50% to all allies in range. This effect lasts for 10 seconds. I don't know what the range is. I would love to see it because I imagine it's probably really good. If it says within range, then it doesn't mean adjacent. It probably means an actual sizable area, I am assuming, which is incredibly powerful. It's actually a very good ultimate for a defender because it's protecting against 2 different damage types. With heroes like this, we're kind of nullifying Regulus even further. So at max level, this will grant Ghan 3 extra block, as well as all allies within whatever range this is, a 50% damage reduction to both damage types, for 15 seconds, which in my opinion is incredibly good. Just that alone would make him really good in Gear Raid 2 in my opinion. I don't think that would necessarily be too useful in the arenas, as I think you kind of burst stuff before damage becomes a problem. So I don't think he's actually that good for the arena in terms of this ultimate in particular. Next up, we'll have a look at his 2 passives. Taking damage has a 15% chance to attack up to 10 enemies ahead, dealing 300% AoE damage. The trigger chance can increase to 25%, and the AoE damage can increase to 500%. This is again probably going to be defense scaling based on his talent. So that's a 500% AoE nuke on a 25% chance, and it doesn't state that it has a cooldown. This is absolutely broken. This seems to be incredibly powerful to me. If it doesn't have a cooldown and if it triggers that easily, then surely you put him in Tide and you just try desperately to keep him alive, and then everything just dies attacking him, because he's increasing his block. So if you give him the artifact Olag's Wall, you use Battle Cry, he's going to have a massive block, something like 7 block, which is insane. You could even stack it with a Soul Day to increase it even further. And he's going to have so many enemies attacking him, and he's just going to be smashing out these AoE blasts of damage, which will become very, very high impact pretty quickly. So I think that's a really, really, really strong passive for sure. His second passive, Insensibility, activated when HP falls below 30%, reduces the damage received that's below 25% of max HP to 10 for 10 seconds. So this duration can increase from 10 to 15 with skill ups, and the damage threshold can trigger at 40% instead of 30% as well. So this wording is a little bit confusing, but the way I understand it is this. When his HP is reduced below either 40 or 30%, it triggers Insensibility for 10 to 15 seconds. During that duration, if he takes damage that is less than 25% of his max HP, so I'm assuming per damage instance, so if you hit him with a big attack, and that attack is less than 25% HP, it is reduced to 10. And the same for many instances of small damage. You'll only actually do proper damage to him if you deal over 25% of his max HP. Bear in mind he is the second highest HP character in the game, only behind Abomination, who has around 30,000. This guy is only about a K&a-half short of that. So this is going to be a very, very powerful passive. It's 15 seconds of just ignoring all damage other than one shot. So it's not really one shot protection, because anything over 25% of his max HP is still going to go through. So unlike Brokir or Regulus, he doesn't have really good protections against that kind of stuff. Baron, for example, which does reduce his ability to tank in Gear Raid 2 quite a bit. But I think he is still incredibly good, just for even his base stats and his ultimate in particular. Even this is just really good to have a defender who can block so much and do so much damage. Ghan may be the best defender in the game now. I'm a bit uncertain myself. Obviously I haven't got him, I haven't played with him, I haven't seen him. Being able to grant this much damage reduction to probably a load of allies is crazy good. And being able to deal AoE damage as well as on your basic attacks is really good. And this grants him a massive amount of survivability, which will be incredibly good. And the only place where this isn't going to shine is in Gear Raid 2. So Ghan on paper seems incredibly good so far. And then finally, he has this passive, reduce his cost in arena by 5, so from 19 down to 4. That makes him the cheapest legendary defender to place by a long way. The rest of the defenders all cost 18 to 20. So that is a quick look at his skills. He seems to be very good on paper. And of course, we have his Lord skill here as well, which we went over already. So let's take a look at his awakenings next. So first awakening, Insensibility. The cooldown is reduced by 20 seconds. So that will reduce his passive to a 70-second cooldown with a maximum of 15 seconds uptime. So that's quite a sizable chunk of uptime that has, which makes him very, 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 very tanky, very hard to kill. So that's actually a pretty good awakening, I think. 20 seconds is a huge amount of reduction. His second awakening grants all faction allies 5% damage, and not to forget, it also grants him an extra 200 attack, which is directly going into any of his attacks, which scales on any of his damage and can be scaled on gear as well. So this is actually a really good stat bonus on top. So his Awakening 3 is pretty crazy as well. After his ultimate battle cry finishes, so the 10 to 15 second duration, his next basic attack turns into an enhanced version of Frantic Retribution. However, instead of dealing up to 500%, it does up to 1000% damage based on the amount of damage instances he takes during his ultimate. Bear in mind, his ultimate lasts 15 seconds, he'll get hit quite a bit. I think it's fairly likely he'll actually be dealing 1000% AoE damage, which is actually just ridiculously strong. So the Awakening 3 seems really powerful as well. Awakening 4 just flat out reduces damage taken by 8%, so that's really good. That's nearly an entire barrier accessory set bonus, which is, yeah, pretty good. And Awakening 5, Battlecry gains a bonus range, so I'm guessing that means an extra tile, so that should be really good as well, just to increase the amount of damage reduction you're passing to allies, which will be very good in the latest campaign stages as well, in the Chapter 9. from looking at Ghan, he seems kind of insane. I think he could definitely be the best defender in the game. He has the ability to do a bunch of damage. He has massive protective abilities for his allies. He has a very good amount of block. He deals AoE damage, he deals AoE burst damage, and he has a really good way of reducing the damage he takes. Not to mention, he scales on defense, which is just fantastic. And he has really good Lord benefits if you do have any of the other faction members. So Ghan, on paper, so far, looks incredibly good. So my initial thoughts of Ghan are very, very good hero. Congratulations if you managed to somehow pull him. I imagine he'll serve you very, very well. So if I were lucky enough to pull Ghan, how exactly would I gear him? It's a bit tricky. It depends where you want to use him. If you want to use him as a standard defender, then just gear him mostly HP and defense. I would probably use 2 HP, 1 defense if you're using him to actually tank. But I think where Ghan shines is probably going to be in doing some damage. I would probably gear him with 2 defense % main stats and probably a crit damage % main stat, and aim for 100% crit rate from subs and try and build him like a DPS, because I think that's probably where he shines. Although he does have a massive base HP pool to take advantage of, he scales on defense, and I would really like to try to build him as a damage dealer who will be tanky from that defense. I don't quite know the ratio or how much scaling you get from that, but I think you're probably safe not taking a HP % main, just going 2 times the defense %, taking a crit damage %, building as much crit rate as you can, and gaining more defense and subs as you can, and picking up some HP as well. For me personally, that's what I would try. I would build him as a DPS, but around defense instead of attack. For reference, I'm using my Captain Reeve a lot in group arena at the moment, and I've geared him as a DPS with 2 crit damage mains and with an attack % main. So this isn't perfect gear, this is kind of just what I have around, but it allows me to get near 100% crit rate, bunch of crit damage, and he still has a reasonable amount of attack. I would try to do this, but the other way around, but with 2 defense % mains instead of 1, and then try to pick up crit damage on the third piece, and aim for that 100% crit rate really ideally to make the most of it, because he seems like he can really dish out a lot of damage, and I would be very interested in experimenting with it. Obviously though, this is all kind of just theory craft, I don't know anything yet. In terms of what gear sets I would give him, it's kind of tricky because there's nothing that really scales heavily on defense. I would probably choose to give Ghan the Night Terror set just because it's a pretty good DPS set. It grants you a damage % increase, not attack or anything else, it's just damage. After critting, he's attacking 3 times every attack on his basic attack, so I think it's probably the best one for him. His basic attack interval, if I remember, was around 2.4, so that falls in line with the 3-second timer on the Night Terror passive. So that's my choice for that set. I don't think it's too big of a deal, but you know, it's theory craft, right? So we'll just talk about assumptions. And then I would probably give him the tower set on the left side, just to give him a bit more survivability, because it does grant 25% HP, and the 10% defense is going to be nice for some damage. So yeah, that's how I would build Ghan personally. And for artifacts, I would be giving him the Goddess's Grace, as it increases defense by a fixed amount, and it grants more defense based on how long he's been down on the field. That's my choices for how I would build Ghan. Let me know if you've got him, what you think of him. I'd be very interested to see more of him in future when people eventually start to pull him. He definitely seems like an incredibly powerful hero. I think he could be used in a bunch of places. Primarily, he'll be very good in arena. I think he'll be good in group arena as well, just for how much block he has. It's actually really good in holding the waves. I'm finding a massive amount of success using Captain Reeve for that exact purpose. I think he'll be very good in gear raid too. I think he'll be amazing in campaign progression, and naturally he'll be good in arena predominantly due to his faction. Very good in group, very good in continuous damage. And I think he'll also be very good in Tide and maybe basic trial as well. Anyway, that's my initial overview of the new Legendary Lord Ghan for the Chaos faction. Thank you guys very much for watching. Have a lovely day. Take care and bye-bye.